English translation 474th contact. Monday, 3rd November 2008, 16:14 hours.
My greetings, dear friend. What is so important that you urgently need to speak to me?
Greetings, Quetzal, my friend. Actually, I thought that I would see you only in December, because Safarina told me on the 1st of October that you are all on holiday and will not return until December. But last Saturday, Safarina watched our meeting and realized that I have an urgent matter to discuss with you.
If that is so, let us hear what you have to say. In fact, it was agreed that Safarina was to call me or Ptah back from vacation if something came up that required our attention and decision.
This arrangement was also a good one, because I'm happy if we can discuss and resolve this today and not have to wait until December.
Then speak.
It is about the extent to which a friend of a core group member, who is not a descendant of a founding member, can be allowed to stay overnight at the respective core group member's place in the center without violating the bylaws and house rules. Why I ask about this? Our core group member S has a friend, the AI, who is a passive member. Now the question is how often it is right for her to spend the night in the center with S. For my part, because questions were raised, I exceptionally allowed myself, over your head and over what you had ordered, to make a suggestion to the whole group that A sleeps with S from Saturday to Sunday. It is, and was clear to me that I should have asked you for advice first, because this is something that was not considered further when you ordered it. In addition, the group suggested that A could come to the center every day and be with S when he was off work, after which she had to leave the center at 22 Sauquance hours as a passive member, just as the house rules determine, which yes, you also helped to make in this relationship. The whole group has agreed to these proposals, so the only question is whether you can give your consent. I also have to say that I have said that it is not acceptable that A can simply apply for core group membership in order to become practically resident with S in the center. And how do you see it? How many times a week can it be expected that S stays with A and A with S, so that it does not mean that S lives with A respectively with A at his place?
Concerning Saturday respectively, Saturday night, your decision of the right can be put into action so that A can stay with S from Saturday to Sunday. Actually, there should not be anything against it, but the whole group should consider that A should at least work on Saturday afternoon at her appropriate activities in the center. Only in this case it would be the right, as it is also the case with all other passive members who spend the night in the center or on its premises. If A wants to spend the night in the center with S, then she has to insert herself as a passive member into the house rule, which says that whoever does not only appear in the center for half an hour to acquire writings, but stays longer or even stays overnight, has to cooperate actively and within an appropriate framework. This also refers to a reasonable amount of time and work regarding A. If she stays in the center and with S in the evening until 22 hours, whereby I think that at least a working time of 30 minutes should be appropriate, which should certainly be able to be done with cleaning work or kitchen work. This would also satisfy the house rules regarding the 30 minutes, because as a passive member she also has to follow them. And of course S must not be interfered with in his work. Concerning a several times a week overnight stay of S with A, or this one with S, this would already be a habit and thus a living with another. A night spent alternately by two unmarried persons once a week, if they are not of the same rank and do not live together, can be regarded as an acceptable form of right and wrong. That is to say, nothing of wrong can be opposed to it, and it cannot be regarded as living with the other person either, which would be the case if it happened at least twice. With regard to rank, in the case mentioned, there is, for example, core group and passive membership, by which the housing conditions in the center are regulated. We have also been doing this for a very, very long time, in accordance with a general population resolution, which we are very satisfied with and have been able to establish a valuable order in this respect. But what I still have to say in regard to S and his girlfriend A is this. According to our records, since the two have been involved, S has become extremely isolated from the center life of the core group members and no longer participates in it, just as was the case with Engelbert, Maria, and C. He has already developed a degree of solitude, which he should quickly get rid of because his actions have already caused a certain degree of alienation from the core group members. It is important for him to participate more intensively in group life again, and not to spend as much time in his living and sleeping quarters as before. The kitchen is the actual place where he should spend some time in the evening and talk to the group members, also when his girlfriend A is present. S is also to be told that he should be more concerned with his work and spend less time on his private matters during working hours. In fact, he does not stick to the work schedule I have drawn up, but devotes himself to many things that are of a private nature, such as when he spends his time in the kitchen drinking coffee and doing crossword puzzles over the given time norm, but also often refrains from working when he receives private visitors.
I think what you say is good, true, and fair.
To the already explained, I have the following to say. The rule that only core group members should live in the center is based on our long-standing experience that infiltration by persons not committed to the cause occurs very quickly if they move into a place that is exclusively for human beings who are connected with the cause. In this respect, there are centuries-old experiences in our own peoples. In relation to your grouping, respectively to the core group members of the Figu Association, it is therefore necessary, according to our own experience, that the order and rules are respected, that only core group members live in the center and in other buildings belonging to the association, according to the provisions of the statutes and contracts. For reasons of fairness, an exception exists only for the direct descendants of founding members, who may be allowed as a one-time consequence to live in the center with life partners, even if they do not belong to the passive group or to this one. However, this right exists only for the direct descendants of the founding members, although the necessary living space must also be available. However, if such descendants leave the center or die, then their partners and descendants will no longer have the right of residence either, if they are not core group members, as is the case with other Figu residences, as stated in the statutes. This necessity is given that the center should not gradually lose its order and purpose through infiltration of non-core group members, because if this were to happen, the inevitable consequence would be that the mission would begin to suffer and ultimately be destroyed. But this must be prevented by this order and regulation. And why descendants of founding members are granted the aforementioned special right is because the founding members have given up and left behind everything concerning their own homes in order to become resident in the center and to actively participate in the construction of the center, both technically and financially. So, for the sake of the mission, they have given up their former lives extensively and have made a commitment that cannot be ignored. If they had kept their own homes, they would have had to raise their descendants there and would also not have been able to bring about this mission, which was required in a very hard way. By moving in and living there, as well as by their tireless work in the center, all the founding members have had to give up a great many things that would have been given to them if they had kept their former homes and continued to live there. And by the fact that the founding members became resident in the center, this also became, understandably enough, the parental home for their descendants, which must remain theirs.
This is clear and understandable.
As far as S and A are concerned, the following is to be said. First of all, S is not a founding member, but a member who joined the core group afterwards, so he cannot claim any descendant rights. A herself is not a core group member, but a passive member. Therefore, she as such also has no right to live in the center, even if she is associated with S. The arrangement that he can spend the night out of the center with her on Wednesdays is based on the fact that such a procedure is normal, but it is also related to the task he has taken over from you with regard to the daily center work and all duties connected with it. He voluntarily took over these from you when it was a matter of relieving you of your burden as a result of your health breakdown. Voluntariness is a matter of honor, to which one stands by at any time comprehensively without any argument or grumbling. And in doing so, he must bear in mind that during the time you have been doing these tasks he has taken over from you, you have never had this free time and night's rest as he has. You have been active for 18 to 20 hours a day and sometimes even for days, and so what is demanded of him is only a very small part of what you have accomplished, just as it is only a small part of what other core group members who came after him are also doing today. If over all these years the work performance of S is looked at, as I have done, and an average is made, then it becomes apparent that it is only 1/3 of what a man of his workmanship can and does on average. So Wednesday, respectively, Wednesday afternoon, and Wednesday night is very well appropriate in the way I have ordered it, and as it was accepted by an overall decision of the core group members, and also by S himself. So it would be extremely unwise and also contrary to the decision of the whole group, and also contrary to the promise of S, if this decision was disregarded and something new was determined, such as that he would spend 2 nights outside the center. Resolutions cannot be made easy, and also promises cannot be given, which are then disregarded and overturned on this or that occasion. A word and a resolution must be and remain a word and a resolution, and a promise, unless there are major changes and factors that necessarily require new resolutions, or necessarily invalidate a promise. If this is not done, the whole thing will lead to chaos, fickleness, conflict, and destruction of order. Laws, rules, and regulations are made to maintain law and order, not to break and violate it. But if there is also a single break, no matter how small, then this means the beginning of the end, namely, that everything will certainly be destroyed. It is also to be noted that personal opinions, thoughts, and feelings must never be included in such things. For personal thoughts and feelings can never be reconciled with a necessary law, with an order, with rules and regulations when it comes to maintaining them. Personal thoughts and feelings in this relationship must therefore in any case be put aside and must not be taken into consideration when it comes to keeping laws and rules. An order, decrees, and a given word and promise, because these alone are important. But if this is disregarded as a result of personal thoughts, respectively views and feelings, then this is inevitably the beginning of everything being destroyed. So if there is also only one exception, then this means that another exception follows, and then another exception again, whereby after 2 exceptions, the whole thing becomes the rule. But this means that everything that has been decided on laws, rules, regulations, and a created order is irresponsibly disregarded and destroyed.
What you have said now is obvious and understandable to me. It is only to be hoped that the whole thing is also understood by all the others who have to decide about it, or to fit in.
But I am not finished with what I have said, my friend, because I can't avoid saying something about Essie's commitment and interest in the work. As I have noticed over the years, He often simply leaves daily work lying around and goes home when it is necessary that the work he has begun should still be done. Your center is a farm similar to an agricultural enterprise, where the work can only be finished when the work has been completed. Also, when the actual working time is exceeded, which is already drastically reduced in relation to S. It is probably true that it has happened here and there. That he was still working in the evening when other core group members, or also passive members, worked until darkness. But as I had to realize, this usually happened only reluctantly. Furthermore, I have noticed various things over the years, and therefore I have to complain that when S is assigned work, he does it only partially, or not at all, but waits for passive or core group members to come to the center and do it for him. All this is an attitude that cannot be called comradely or missionary, so S should make a great effort to create a healthy attitude and behavior in himself. And what is to be said about all members and responsible persons who have to make any decisions concerning rules, regulations, and a valuable order, is that they all have to learn that only clear mind and logical reason are important when making decisions concerning the observance of given laws, rules, orders, and regulations. However, if this is not taken into account, and any personal opinions, thoughts, and feelings are given and followed, this inevitably leads to wrong arguments, views, decisions, and resolutions. And exactly this illogical factor is the crux of the matter for some core group members when they have something to decide and determine, whereby they mentally, emotionally, or even emotionally approach a matter concerning laws, rules, orders, and regulations, and make wrong decisions and resolutions.
Unfortunately, many human beings are just sadly of the wrong opinion that everything has to be handled with personal thoughts, feelings, and emotions, but not with thoughts that are related to a specific problem. This also means that some things are described as unjust and inhuman, and thus also that others should be granted certain rights because they are only human beings, even if what is being granted is contrary to laws, rules, and regulations. What I still want to ask, however, is, how should it be considered with work for A, respectively, what should it be used for?
It is fundamentally wrong if something is decided with personal thoughts, feelings, and emotions, then the wrong thing will surely result. And established rights, laws, rules, regulations, and the order cannot simply be bent according to how wrongly thought and demanded by false humanity, false sense of rights and false compassion, etc. is. Now, as far as A and work for her is concerned, it is probably good if she is employed wherever she can be active according to her strength and ability. That should not be difficult to determine by those core group members who can assign work to her. Working with the core group members in this way also has the advantage for everyone that they can get to know each other better, communicate with each other, and build the good interpersonal relationships that are necessary for good relations.
That should also be clear. The only question is whether A is willing to fit into your instructions, and of course S is also part of it.
The house rules and order are clear and easy to understand, and if the rules and order are to be maintained, they should also be followed. This also applies to the rules I gave him regarding his working hours on March 5, 2002, which he unfortunately does not follow, but instead takes frequent coffee breaks, receives private visits, does private things with hunting companions, and takes other time-outs than those granted to him by the rules, which were adapted to his advantage and to his own lethargic attitude to work, to the amount of work and intensity of work. If he receives remuneration from the core group members, this corresponds to an official employment relationship, according to which he cannot simply interrupt his work for private reasons and leave it at his own free will, but must keep to his work obligations. If he had a job with a foreign employer, Then he would have to abide by the rules there as well and also provide much more in terms of performance than he is accustomed to providing at the center, which in my opinion all group members are too lenient and too much concessions are made to him in this respect. Although it is to be acknowledged, as I said on the 5th of March 2002, that he has strong lethargic traits which should be taken into account, this does not mean that he should take special advantage of them. He is to abide by the given rules and do his duty as he is really able to do, if he makes a serious effort to do so and if he accepts his responsibility.
What more can I say? Because I also think responsibility comes first. But one more question. If Acelina keeps watch, always provided that she does so that Ava can do her duties, such as 30 minutes on Saturday or in the evening, can this also be credited to her as work, which I would only find true?
That is unquestionable. Because of course this can also be considered work, both on Saturday afternoons and in the evening, when it can also be more than 30 minutes, which would probably be very desirable for Eva.
Everything really depends on whether A wants it or not. Yes, we will see. If you still have time, I would like to give you this for reading. It's because Sim Yase once said that we are a residential community, which is very offensive here on Earth, and why some core group members are also attacked by enemies from outside. So, I have written something about this, if you want to read it, please.
Shared apartment.
From a sociological point of view, a living and residential community is a community consisting of a group of persons who share a common household, respectively a house or apartment, where they live in common living and sleeping quarters, thus forming a community that rejects any norm of property, performance, competition, and moral concepts of civil society. The term living and residential community was invented by the founders in the 1960s, and since then, the living and residential community has been considered and practiced as a component of alternative culture. In living and living communities, a sexual community of several persons is also sometimes cultivated. Shared housing is also defined as a community of several persons or couples in a shared apartment with a shared kitchen, bathroom, household appliances in connection with shared housekeeping, where everything and anything is done and used together. What the Figu maintains in the center is not a living and residential community with a common housekeeping, because every single member and every family has its own living and sleeping quarters, which have to be looked after by themselves. Washing one's own laundry is also the responsibility of each individual and not of the community. What the Figu maintains in the center is a residential group of interests respectively, a residential group, which is called IWG respectively, in the simple sense simply WG, but which does not correspond to a residential community, but, as explained, to a residential group in which each member has his own personal obligations and manages his own household with regard to his private living and sleeping space, to linen and laundry care, screed, cellar and parking space, etc. With regard to the Figu Center, bathrooms, toilets and showers may be used by all members of the association and, according to a specific plan, are to be maintained alternately by all members of the association, also by those who do not live in the center, because it is an association property. Washing machines and tumble dryers are operated by each club member for a corresponding fee, but are maintained by external mechanics. As far as the kitchen is concerned, it will be used by all persons in charge who have cooking service according to a schedule, also by club members who do not live in the center. Club members living in the center pay a regular and reasonable monthly fee, which is used to buy food. Club members who are not resident in the center pay a contribution towards expenses for meals per day of attendance when they eat in the center. The purchased food is processed into edibles on weekdays by certain paid club members in order to feed the cost-paying members. This, unless other club members coming from outside the center or passive members take over the cooking of their own free will. So it should be clear that the center is not a community of life and living together, but effectively an interest residential group, which corresponds to a simple residential group, respectively, a so-called shared flat, in which every member of the association, respectively, all residents of the center, lead their own private life, have their own separate living and sleeping quarters, etc., for which they are responsible in every respect, and for which it must also be said that they have financed these premises themselves. There is therefore no living and residential community in the center, because such a community is completely different from an interest living group, respectively residential group, or shared flat, as is the case in the center, and is not part of an alternative culture. In contrast to living and residential communities, an interest group or a residential group has nothing objectionable in itself, which is why, as a rule, all types of residential groups or shared flats maintained by many institutions are not referred to as living and residential communities if, for any reason whatsoever, medical, criminal, professional, etc., they are not financed by the center. To place a group of people, 2, 3, 4 or more, in an apartment or house in a residential group where order prevails and social norms and morals are cultivated without degeneration. Well, it would be commendable if the difference between living and residential community were to be understood and understood from now on, and that in the center there is not such a difference, but rather an interest living group respectively, a residential group, nothing more and nothing less.
What you have explained here is very good, and it also corresponds to what is actually given. I also know that Sim Yase used the term Wohngemeinschaft, which is disreputable on Earth and is understood in a completely different way than here. In our usage and term, a flat-sharing community is a family community living in a common dwelling, whereas in your country, a flat-sharing community is run in a completely different form, and in fact in a completely different way than you have described it. What you maintain in the center is actually an interest living group, respectively, a living group, which you call WG, and in which core group members from different families of origin live in individual rooms. Sim Yase was not aware of what is behind a shared apartment on Earth, which is why she used the word shared apartment, as it is common in our country.
She certainly did not deal with earthly living communities either. But something else. The other day I received a nasty email about climate change because I said that it could no longer be stopped and that it was now simply taking its course. What is happening now can no longer be changed and can no longer be stopped. The only thing that could be done was to finally stop the increase in overpopulation and reduce it through normal deaths.
I was actually told that this was a lie, because the Earth could easily cope with 100 billion 100,000 humans, and also feed them if the resources were used and distributed correctly.
In my opinion, it does not get any more insane than that, because a human must be completely crazy and irresponsible, as well as uneducated if he can spread and claim such nonsense. The true evil of climate change is that everything that is done about it is absolute nonsense. Because what is decided by loudmouthed politicians and scientists at conferences, which moreover, often swallow up millions of dollars, is absolutely nonsensical. This is because what has been decided, which is to be done over a period of years, is already far outdated again by the growing overpopulation, if what has been decided can be put into practice. That is my view of the whole thing. And I would like to reiterate that this is indeed the case, and not any other way, because the problems are always many times greater than when the decision was taken. because overpopulation is growing inexorably, now at around 100 million per year. Yes, there are already 7.6 billion humans, 7,600,000, although the wrong census only mentions the 6.5 billion, 6,500,000, because all sorts of circumstances mean that around 1 billion, 1,000 are not counted. If a decision is now taken, for example, to create more energy within 6 years, or to reduce harmful emissions, the world will be overpopulated with a further 600 million human beings in that time. If such decisions are taken which are to be implemented over a period of 10 years, then the world's population will increase by 1 billion, 1,000 humans in that time. But this is not taken into consideration by very clever politicians and scientists, because they are not even able to think up to the tip of their nose. Consequently, their decisions on measures for energy production and the emission of harmful emissions are useless and already very far outdated when they start to take effect. And this is also the case with many other measures, such as those relating to social welfare, medicine, crime, the shortage of drinking water and resources of all kinds, as well as the migration of peoples, which is still not recognized as such because the human beings involved are simply called political refugees and asylum seekers. In relation to all these problems, the thinking is simply for the present moment and the present state of affairs, not for the future. Simply thinking about this and about the unstoppable growth in overpopulation would be the true way forward. Only by considering the future and all of this, by thinking with reason, and by taking into account all that will result from the further growth of overpopulation in an ever worse way, can true decisions and measures be taken, the most important factor of which is a worldwide and effective birth control. But whether the intelligence of the politicians and scientists responsible for this will be sufficient in the foreseeable future to take the necessary decisions and measures is just as questionable as whether the intelligence of those human beings in the worldwide population who live under the delusion that their happiness depends solely on rich children. Whether all of these people will realize early enough that the climate catastrophe and all other inexorably growing evils can only be changed for the better by a globally regulated rigorous birth stop and by the naturally occurring deaths. That is questionable, for personal egoism is more powerful than reason and logic. From this egoism the principle simply applies. After me, the deluge. So, it is irrelevant which enormous burdens of all kinds the descendants have to bear and to unload, if they can still do it at all, and if they do not lead everything finally into destruction and annihilation. Reason and logic, as well as consideration for the planet and for everything of existence in general, is of necessity. Modesty, frugality, justice, righteousness, as well as understanding, reason and logic in every respect are appropriate and demanded of every single human being in the face of all personal demands and desires, as well as of existence, nature, and the planet. These fundamental factors are necessary in order to make true choices for far-reaching measures that reach into a useful future, and which must not simply be stupid decisions of absolute uselessness, such as those made in complete incomprehension by the responsible politicians and scientists. And such a true decision, as well as an effective measure, can only be a worldwide regulated birth stop, which would mean that the natural deaths would exceed the number of births, and thus, just like the reduction of births, would also minimize the large number of humanity to a reasonable level. The Earth is designed for 529 million human beings who can be fed in abundance by nature, and 3 times that number, that is to say about 1.5 billion 1,500,000, could still be borne by the planet without any problems, and would also be bearable for the climate, because the harmful emissions and poisons, etc., would be reduced to a mass that is bearable for nature, and it could recover, together with the climate, the waters, and the atmosphere, and the ozone belt. In addition to all the many human evils, including the ever-diminishing interpersonal relationships and the indifference and callousness among human beings, There are also the growing natural disasters which have long been caused by overpopulation. This must be addressed again and again, as must the irresponsibility of criminal state powers, religious fanatics, and racists. They are criminals who spread war and hatred throughout the world, causing enormous destruction and mass murder of human beings by their secret services and military, as is the case with the state ruinator George W. Bush in the USA, who fortunately cannot be re-elected. The terrorists who spread terror and death throughout the world must also be mentioned, for they too are elements of humanity criminals, whose fanaticism brings just as much disaster to the world and to humanity. They do the same as the rebel armies, special groups, and gangsters who take hostages and use them to carry out extortion, but they also brutally torture and murder masses of innocent human beings.
Much more could be added to what you say, but even if that were done, the responsible politicians and scientists would also think they were smarter, more knowledgeable, and wiser, although they lack these factors. And indeed, it is that they are not thinking even to the tip of their nose. As you say, because they are so narrow-minded about their opinionatedness and incapable of recognizing and understanding the truth that there is darkness in their minds and reason. So it is not surprising that they are not able to think into the future, for in their whole world of thought they are trapped in the present and in the past alone, from which they cannot free themselves. But this means that they are unable to calculate and understand the effects from the causes, and not even beginning to understand the probability of what will result from the causes as an effect. It is very unfortunate that human beings of this kind, who have no idea about the real things of reality, spend their time uselessly in political offices and scientific centers, without being able to take their responsibility, because they lack the intellect, reason, and logic for it, as well as the possibility to recognize what effects certain old and present causes will have in the future. All those who are to be called in this way are so narrow-minded that they do not recognize all the increasing evils of all kinds, and also the truly very bad effects of climate change, with all the natural disasters for what they really are, namely, the catastrophic consequences of overpopulation. And what you say about the criminal rulers, the religious fanatics, and the terrorists, it should also be mentioned that this type of human beings is a human lives of absolute insignificance, and consequently they also torture, rape, and murder completely unscrupulously, regardless of whether the victims are innocent women, children, and men. They know not mercy, but only their malignant degeneration, which is spreading more and more among Earth humans, and this the greater the overpopulation becomes. For through this, human beings become more and more indifferent, unscrupulous, non-committal, mean, and brutal against each other, as well as unforgivable, criminal, and criminal.
But that's exactly what many of those half-wits who pretend to be professionals, like psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers, etc., who are not able to see the true extent of what is happening in the cause of overpopulation as evolving effects. These firecrackers are also not able to calculate the probability that results as an effect from everything, so they are also not able to recognize the facts that result from the whole in the near and distant future. They call themselves pompous experts, hold doctorates and professorships or other high-ranking titles, but they have little knowledge of their subject, which they are not able to expand through their own initiative and intelligence. They simply lack the necessary intellect, the necessary reason and intelligence, as well as the ability to draw logical conclusions and calculate probabilities.
This is indeed the greatest evil of many who hold academic or special professional titles, who wallow in them and mistakenly think that they are above all those who do not hold high titles or with whom they have to deal with as a result of their activity. Those whom it concerns live in an autocratic arrogance, not realizing that their knowledge and intelligence is not in any way the final conclusion of wisdom. That is probably not all that can be said about it.
I guess it is.
Then we must end our conversation here because I must return to my duties. So I want to say goodbye and tell you that I am always ready to come here and assist you in all things if they require my presence. Goodbye.
Then farewell. Salome and goodbye, hopefully.
The opportunity will surely come. Goodbye, my friend.